astonished by the unaccustomed glow, as if immanent in the shadows, started up imps with wry limbs and carved beast visages, sprite, prompters, goblin, wizard, or fairy small, and genie, fairer, but unsouled, and poor, and fallen beings, their heavenly portion lost, and errant divinities trapped in time's dust.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're enjoying this winter weather and not catching colds like I am. We're reading in Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds, following King Aswapati's journey through the inner worlds, the inner planes of consciousness. He had achieved a very high level of spiritual realization, and he's looking for the key to nature's change. And he's peering into these subtle worlds, looking for that key. And he's exploring them one by one, starting from the bottom and working his way up. So he started with the kingdom of subtle matter, which is closest to our world. And now he's moved into the kingdom of the little life, the life worlds. And this is the lower life worlds. And he will continue his journey. I thought I would begin today. I came across a very interesting letter by Sri Aurobindo about these subtle worlds. We've come across a number of times already in the last couple of cantos where at times he's describing this other world, this inner plane of consciousness, and at other times he's describing its influence in our world. So this letter specifically addresses this relationship between these worlds and our world. And I think it gives a nice perspective on a lot of these issues and questions that come up. It's from Letters on Yoga 1. He says, if we regard the gradation of worlds or planes as a whole, we see them as a great connected, complex movement. The higher precipitate their influences on the lower. The lower react to the higher and develop or manifest in themselves, within their own formula, something that corresponds to the superior power and its action. The material world has evolved life in obedience to a pressure from the vital plane, mind in obedience to a pressure from the mental plane. It is now trying to evolve supermind in obedience to a pressure from the supramental plane. In more detail, particular forces, movements, powers, beings of a higher world can throw themselves on the lower to establish appropriate and corresponding forms which will connect them with the material domain and, as it were, reproduce or project their action here. And each thing created here has, supporting it, subtler envelopes or forms of itself, which make it subsist and connect it with the forces acting from above. Man, for instance, has, besides his gross physical body, subtler sheaths or bodies by which he lives behind the veil in direct connection with supraphysical planes of consciousness, and can be influenced by their powers, movements, and beings. What takes place in life has always behind it pre-existent movements and forms in the occult vital planes. What takes place in mind presupposes pre-existent movements and forms in the occult mental planes. That is an aspect of things which becomes more and more evident, insistent, and important the more we progress in a dynamic yoga. But all this must not be taken in too rigid and mechanical sense. It is an immense plastic movement full of the play of possibilities, and must be seized by a flexible and subtle tact or sense in the seeing consciousness. It cannot be reduced to a too rigorous logical or mathematical formula. 2 or 3 points must be pressed in order that this plasticity may not be lost to our view. First, each plane, in spite of its connection with others above and below it, is yet a world in itself, with its own movements, forces, beings, types, forms, existing as if for its and their own sake, under its own laws, for its own manifestation, without apparent regard for other members of the great series. And thus, if we regard the vital or the subtle physical plane, we see great ranges of it, most of it, existing in themselves without any relation with the material world, and with no movement to affect or influence it, still less to precipitate a corresponding manifestation in the physical formula. At most, we can say that the existence of anything in the vital, subtle physical, or any other plane creates a possibility for a corresponding movement of manifestation in the physical world. But something more is needed to turn that static or latent possibility into a dynamic potentiality or an actual urge towards a material creation. that something may be a call from the material plane, e.g., some force or someone in the physical existence entering into touch with a supraphysical power or world or part of it and moved to bring it down into the earth life. Or it may be an impulse in the vital or other plane itself, e.g., a vital being moved to extend his action towards the earth and establish there a kingdom for himself, or the play of the forces for which he stands in his own domain. Or it may be a pressure from above, let us say some supramental or mental power precipitating its formation from above and developing forms and movements on the vital level as a means of transit to its self-creation in the material world. Or it may be all of these things acting together, in which case there is the greatest possibility of an effective creation. I'll stop there. He goes on and elaborates on some more of the kind of details of it, but that gives us a pretty good picture of the relation of these different subtle physical planes with our own plane. In what we were just reading last time, he was describing the beings of this kingdom of the little life. And where we left off, he was mentioning how they influence our world as well. He says, I'll just read the last section of where we left off on near the top of 153. He says, nor there alone is their empire or their role, wherever our soulless minds and guideless lives, and in a small body self is all that counts. Wherever love and light and largeness lack, these crooked fashioners take up their task. To all half-conscious worlds, they extend their reign. Here too these godlings drive our human hearts. Our nature's twilight is their lurking place. Here too the darkened primitive heart obeys the veiled suggestions of a hidden mind that dogs our knowledge with misleading light and stands between us and the truth that saves. That's where we left off last time. So, Turia, would you like to read?
Where are you?
So we're at line 81.
81?
Yes.
It speaks to us with the voices of the night. Our darkened lives. Our darkened lives to greater darkness move. Our seekings listen to calamitous hopes. A structure of unseeing thoughts is built, and reason used by an irrational force. This earth is not alone our teacher and nurse. The powers of all the worlds have entrance here. In their own fields, they follow the will of law and cherish the safety of a settled type. on Earth, out of their changeless orbit thrown, their law is kept, lost their fixed form of things. Into a creative chaos they are cast, where all asks order but is driven by chance. Strangers to earth nature, they must learn earth's ways. Aliens or opposites, they must unite. They work and battle, and with pain agree. These join those parts, all parts, and joins the new, but never can we know and truly live till all have found their divine harmony.
Thank you.
What are godlings?
They're these subtle physical beings. These subtle physical beings. Subtle physical.
Subtle physical.
Yeah.
But not gods.
He calls them gods, but they're not the highest God. They can be in any of these different regions. We're talking about the Godheads of the little life, and we see how most of them are quite dark and mischievous and, you know.
And to dog.
To dog. Yes.
Yeah, this is what I thought, but they lead. Yeah, with misleading light. So I don't understand. But dogs are left with misleading light.
To dog is a different meaning. It's a second meaning. To dog has a second meaning, which means to kind of hinder. Yeah.
So here, in the beginning, he's describing again the influence of these small vital beings on in our world, in our life. So they can move our life to greater darkness. They set us on devious ways. And they can mislead our knowledge. And then he says, this earth is not alone, our teacher and nurse. The powers of all the worlds have entrance here. So as he was describing in the letter, especially the higher planes have influence on the lower. So we're at the base in physical matter. So all of the different worlds have an entrance, have an influence here in this world. So this is kind of a meeting place of all the worlds here in the physical. And all these different forces from these different realms have to find their harmony, have to integrate with one another. They don't operate as in their own world where they're working within that fixed environment, set on that one pattern. Here, everything is at play, all the different worlds. So that's what he's describing in this passage. On earth, out of their changeless orbit thrown. So in their plane, they're working in this changeless orbit, always following the same principle. That whole world is set up on that principle. But on earth, they're thrown out of that. Their law is kept, but lost their fixed form of things. Into a creative chaos they are cast. So that's the difference. Also, I'll just mention maybe briefly, in the continuation of that letter, Sri Aurobindo says, he describes how these forces, when they influence here in our material world, well, sometimes those influences may take shape, sometimes they may not succeed in taking a shape here. Sometimes it may just have a small effect, and they'll create some kind of influence or form here, but quite different from what it is in its native world. And at other times it can effectuate something quite clearly resembling what it is in its own world. But he says even then it's different, because the law of this world is different than the law of that world. The rhythm of the manifestation here is different than the rhythm of the manifestation in the other worlds. So there's always a difference. And then he even says about the supramental that there would be no reason for it to come down here if it was only going to reproduce what already existed in its own plane. What it will create here on earth is something unique, which is not quite the same as what it is in its own plane. And that's the beauty and the rationale for creating something like that here.
But what is also striking is that the description he gives of the influence and then the transformation and the elevation, and then it has to be again transformed and elevated. In the record of yoga, Sri Aurobindo describes how, even though he was already very, very high, when he reached a level, it was exactly the same as what he describes. When he reached a certain level, there was a resistance from under and a resistance from above, which had to be overcome. And then there was a transformation to be done. And once this transformation was done, he could go on a higher level. But what he said is that even on these levels, there was some kind of resistance to an evolution. It looks like a little bit his description here.
Yeah, that same principle is operative in the transformation of life here and its evolution, because there has to be this integration of all these different planes, or the influences from these higher planes, and they must be integrated with that material principle, which is our base here.
Also in this line that is 89, and cherish the safety of a settled time. I think this in a way, it is here also a wish for security in us, and the mother mentioned also that has to be also nourished or given. And then the other thing is the changes, the transformation and the movement, and how then she also, how to say, I think, okay, the solution is to prevent it, but what is in principle to this two opposite things to integrate it?
Yeah, on the other planes, there's a more fixed type. On our plane, there is this creative chaos that's going on. Though I suppose you're correct that we also long for some stability and relief from that creative chaos. And perhaps when that supramental comes and transforms all of this here in our world, then it will create a more unified whole, let's say, that's not so chaotic. Maybe still complex, composed of many different elements, but they would become coherent and organized fully and harmonized.
I think also in 1969 in the agenda that the mother said that this new conscious thought which came now in 1969 came with strength to give this kind, let's say, of basic or security in a way to.
Yeah, greater force came down at that time, was more settled, stable. Helmut, would you like to continue?
Our life's uncertain way winds circling on. Our mind's unique search asks always light, till they have learned their secret and their source in the light of the timeless and its spaceless home, in the joy of the eternal soul and one. But now the light supreme is far away. Our conscious life obeys the inconscious laws. To ignorant purposes and blind desires, our hearts are moved by an ambiguous force. Even our mind's conquests wear a battered crown. A slowly changing order binds our will. This is our doom until our souls are free. A mighty hand then rolls mind's firmaments back. Infinity takes up the finite's acts, and nature steps into the eternal light. Then only ends this dream of nether life.
Thank you. he suggests that this integration of all these disparate forces here in this world, well, first they create this uncertainty, this difficulty, but also it only is slowly worked out. It takes time for all of that integration to take place. It cannot happen overnight. But until it happens, until that full integration takes place, then only we will have that settled joy of the eternal. Until then, our conscious life obeys the inconscious laws, and to ignorant purposes and blind desires, our hearts are moved by an ambiguous force. A slowly changing order binds our will. This is our doom until our souls are free. A mighty hand then rolls mind's firmaments back. Firmaments are the firm foundations of the universe, typically applied to heaven and earth. But it suggests also this is our doom until our souls are free. If we can enter into our soul and unite with that, that also is, in a sense, independent, free from the outer nature. So we can live in a type of freedom from nature. But it's not actually a complete freedom and independence until the nature itself is transformed. It will also always impose its limitations in the soul's expression, let's say. Though the soul can live in itself and feel free.
Larry, 1973, when mother passed away, this description is exactly what Shabbat wrote for me. I am in Paris, and automatically the light coming very, 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 very far. But you stay inside your soul, but it's a great, great, great dark. I remember maybe 25 years, very, very, very difficult, lot of mistakes. The plunge in total unconscious. For me, I show clearly that in Paris, when I come back, the swing.
But you're saying that you were able to stay within the soul,
Yes,
free,
so that I tell you.
free from that in some sense, independent.
Free, not really free, but you receive a lot of influence
Mm,
of that.
mm,
It's a great battle for the body, for mind, for the life. But when you do some, when you apply in yourself, automatically it's a battle.
mm.
But it's a choice.
Let's continue, Margaret.
the outset of this enigmatic world, which seems at once an enormous brute machine and a slow unmasking of the spirit in things, in this revolving chamber without walls, in which God sits impassive everywhere, as if unknown to himself and by us unseen, in a miracle of inconscient secrecy, yet is all here his action and his will. In this will and sprawl through infinite vacancy, the spirit became matter and lay in the will, a body sleeping without sense or soul.
Thank you. In this section that we're just beginning, Sri Aurobindo is going to give a long description of the evolution and its various stages. This is kind of an introduction just to that. But I'd like it, there's a number of several different interesting images in which he is describing this world and its evolution here in this passage. And Shraddhavan has a very nice commentary on this, which I'd like to read, if I can manage. She says, Sri Aurobindo is going to give us an idea of how this enigmatic world, which we live in, has come into existence and developed. This world is an enigma, a puzzle, a riddle, which is difficult to understand, especially because we see it in contradictory ways. It seems, as many philosophies have described it, to be an enormous brute machine, which goes on and on under its own brute force. Another way to look at it is to see it as a slow unmasking of the spirit in things. We can think of evolution like this, as an evolving process of more and more complicated and complex forms becoming more conscious. It is as if the spirit is slowly removing its mask and revealing itself to us. Then he calls it a revolving chamber without walls, as if the whole universe is a vast spherical room, which is constantly revolving, cycling, whirling. But it has no walls. There are no limits to it. God is sitting within this revolving chamber, occupying every part of it, impassive, not seeming to have any feelings or emotions about it. There is a vast equality in impassivity. He sits there as if he is unknown to himself, as if he does not know who or what he is, and we cannot see him. His existence in the material universe seems to be a miracle of inconscient secrecy, Secretly, he is occupying this apparently inconscient world, this world of matter without consciousness. Yet everything here depends on his action and his will. If we look out into the universe with the wonderful instruments that now have been invented, we can see this whirl and sprawl through infinite vacancy. There are no boundaries to this revolving chamber. In it, the spirit became matter and lay in the world, like a body sleeping, insentient, without sense or soul, a purely material manifestation. So he's beginning his description of this evolution with just the fundamental, basic material universe with which it began, before life, before any consciousness was there. So that's how it appears. God is within everything, but secret, unknown to himself, not seen by anything outside. Yes, would you? The second line from the top on page 155.
Still consciousness was hidden in nature's womb.
Oh, did I skip?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a section. We're at a mass phenomenon of visible shapes on the previous page.
A mass phenomenon of visible shapes, supported by the silence of the void, appeared in the eternal consciousness and seemed an outward and insensible world. There was none there to see and none to feel, only the miraculous inconscient. A subtle wizard skilled was at its task, inventing ways for magical results, managing creation's marvelous device, marking mechanically dumb wisdom's points, using the unthought inevitable idea. It did the works of God's intelligence or wrought the will of some supreme unknown.
Thank you. Let's pause. So this is the beginning of the material universe, working through the power of the inconscient, but here the inconscient holding within it, hidden, as he mentioned earlier, in secrecy, the full power and intelligence of the divine. So only the miraculous inconscient, a subtle wizard skilled at its task, inventing ways for magical results, managing creation's marvelous device, using the unthought, inevitable idea. It did the works of God's intelligence, or wrought the will of some supreme unknown. Wrought here is worked out. Mm. So science recognizes this as the whole secret of the evolution, as if everything is worked out through the inconscient. But because science does not recognize this involution or hidden consciousness within it, within the inconscient, it can only postulate that all of this works out through chance, not through any kind of conscious organization, intelligence, design. It doesn't recognize those as being within the inconscient. But for Sri Aurobindo, this inconscient is like this subtle wizard. It may use devices in order to effectuate its plan, material processes. But yet there is something within it that is forcing it to work in a particular way, in a particular direction. And clearly it seems to be working in a particular direction. It's working towards this unfolding of consciousness, more and more complex forms of consciousness and life. It's not just a haphazard appearance of different things, unrelated, without direction.
What you just referred to and speak about, I think it's so important to change our consciousness about the inconscient. That is, would make a big shift on the earth, and this gets changed. That we are more aware of this, what's behind. So it has to work out God's intelligence.
Okay, we continue. Would you like to read, sir? Next.
Remind me which one?
140.
140. Still, consciousness was hidden in nature's womb. Unfelt was the bliss whose rapture dreamed the worlds. Being was an
inert substance driven by force. At first was only an etheric space. Its huge vibrations circled round and round, housing some unconceived initiative, upheld by a supreme original breath. Expansion and contraction's mystic act created touch and friction in the void into abstract emptiness, broad flash and clasp. Parent of an expanding universe in a matrix of disintegrating force, by spanning it conserved an endless sum.
Thank you. Let's pause. Sri Aurobindo is going back to the very beginnings. At first, there was only an etheric space. And then there are these vibrations. It's huge vibrations circled round and round. Here, I think that he brings in something of the Hindu theory of the origin of the universe, with this supreme original breath, expansion and contraction. These are parts of that theory. Created touch and friction in the void. Into abstract emptiness brought clash and clasp. Parent of an expanding universe. In a matrix of disintegrating force, by spending it conserved in endless sum. So he's conceiving this emptiness of space, and then within that there begins this movement or vibration. Touching, clashing with one another, expanding, contracting. Okay, would you like to read? Continue.
Of an expanding universe in a matrix of disintegrating force, by spending and conserved an endless sum. On the heart of space, it kindled a viewless fire, that scattering worlds as one might scatter seeds, whirled out of luminous order of the stars, an ocean of electric energy, formlessly formed with strange wave particles, constructing by the dance of solid sheen its nightiness in the 8th atom shut to rest. Masses were forged or feigned and visible shapes, light flung the photon swift, revealing spark, and showed in the minuteness of its flash. Imagine this cosmos of apparent things. Thus has been made this real impossible world, an obvious miracle of convincing show.
Thank you. Sri Aurobindo displays for us here some of his knowledge already, I think, probably in the 1930s of physics, pretty up to date with his understandings.
This passage is truly amazing in the sense that it includes quantum physics.
Mm.
We even had put the wave and the particle together.
Yeah.
Existing at the same time. Wave particles, the photons, atoms, all there.
Yeah.
This is what they're saying now.
Mm.
You see, so it's so interesting that energy, as you said earlier, they don't know, uh, they only see the convincing show. So he gives you that option there.
Mm.
It's either an obvious miracle or a convincing show.
Mm.
Science is still believing in the convincing show.
Mm.
And they're describing it as energy, but they have energy as immortal and eternal. Because energy, just changes. It's always there. That's their God.
Mm.
And they describe how it either experiences as a wave or a particle, but it can exist at the same time.
Mm.
So that famous floating cat that is alive and dead at the same time is embodied in this. And then this is also includes the New Age kind of physics, where they say after enlightenment, along.
So you have all the elements all put together in one paragraph. It's pretty amazing.
And in one line, you have everything. Only a poet like Shirley in 165, in one line, he said everything. Shirley put it in one step.
Gangalakshmi, would you like to continue?
So it seems to man's audacious mind, who sits his thought as the arbiter of truth. His impersonal vision as impersonal fact, as witnesses and objective word. His hearing sense and his instrument are defined. His elements, he walked lives and driven out. In the doubtful light by heaven seeds of truth, and swallow up the visage and the head. Or else, forlorn of faith in mind and sense, his knowledge blind body of ignorance. He sees not servant passionate fear, the undevelopment gems of deceiving thoughts, the parabol of mind of your mind.
Thank you. Here in the beginning of this passage, it seems that Sri Aurobindo actually voices some of the criticisms of science in the philosophy of science, that we put our thoughts as arbiters of truth, of personal vision as impersonal fact. It's one of the main criticisms of science, is that it believes that it's presenting an image of impersonal reality, but yet it's coming out of the personal point of view of a particular individual. So it's always conditioned by that person.
But I think more and more science is moving away from that, because this objective world, they no longer believe in the objective world either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The individual vision is also totally conditioned by
by
the viewer.
Conditioned by viewer. Yes, yes, that's right, 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 right,
And
that was the older side.
right.
But now I think it's I think they're open it, but they're still stuck in this other part that it comes up later, which is the parable of the Maya. They're still stuck.
Well, that becomes a different point of view, I mean, that's the religious point of view. But, right. But when I was studying psychology with pretty hard-minded scientists, and they also said, okay, well, yes, there is this personal viewpoint, and the truths that we find are conditioned to some extent, but nevertheless, it's much better than, just throwing it out. So practically, they go ahead and do it anyway, understanding that it's not really quite right, or it's limited, or it's subject to.
psychology has gone way beyond that. I mean, we're, from Pavlov's dog to Schrödinger's cat, there's a big jump. And that really
Yeah.
makes the difference. Today, what they're saying, I don't think he's fighting these guys who are all positivists and
Right.
Freudian and all of that. But those guys, I think, are all gone now. I mean, there's some messages.
I don't know.
They're not in the forefront anymore.
I think no, like I'm saying, I think that they understand that there are limitations, but they go about nevertheless in the same way.
Yeah.
We're still going to collect facts.
Sure.
Based on our senses and our fallible senses, though they may be, and
It's still believing in that, which is also all right. See?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's.
It's all right. The laws of physics still apply.
In a way, we're doing the same thing now. Yeah. I mean, I'm just understanding what I can understand by my limit. You can have an idea of what you're reading, and it has nothing to do with what is happening to you. So it's not science, it's human. I mean, it's our condition.
Right.
And I also think that science is using Maya to their advantage for making money, for example. So there's a whole trade of science that uses this principle, not knowing that they're influenced by something.
But you already explained two sides. One of the materialist who's scientific,
Yeah.
but the other extreme is the ascetic who who has a faith and who goes beyond the mind and sees the truth but rejects the outer thing as a dream.
Yeah.
The two extremes.
Yeah, that's the religious view of Maya, that the whole world and all of this is just an illusion.
We always have to have the both and. The one and the many, that's our original conundrum that we have to solve. And so each individual has to be able to hold these contradictory truths all at the same time. Otherwise, you go into one extreme or the other. And that's the harmony he's talking about, finding the integral yoga, so to speak.
And ultimately, you have to go beyond them to something else.
Well, you go to the supramental.
Yeah.
The supramental includes all
Yeah. It integrates them. Right?
But you have to be so identified with it that these problems don't exist.
Shall we continue?
The vast perpetual motion caught and held in the mysterious and unchanging change of the persistent movement we call time, and ever renewing its recurrent beat. These mobile rounds that stereotype a flux, these static objects in the cosmic dance that are but energies, self-repeating whorls, prolonged by the spirit of the brooding void, awaited life and sense and waking mind. A little the dreamer changed his pose of stone, but when the inconscient, scrupulous work was done and chance coerced by fixed, immutable laws, a scene was set for nature's conscious play.
Thank you.
Forlorn means deprived.
Forlorn
of faith in mind and sense.
Let's read it and then we discuss this. Yeah?
Okay, he's this forlorn, that comes in the previous section that we read at the end of page 155. So there he was introducing this theory of Maya. So they're forlorn of faith, giving up or losing faith in mind and sense. So losing all faith in all of these things, then it turns to the beyond and sees all of this as a Maya, as an illusion. All these things that we perceived with mind and sense is just an illusion. It's nothing real. So that's this other alternative to the scientific view.
Who's a dreamer? There is a dreamer and this big letters.
Well, it seems to be this, perhaps this image of this conscious being beginning to wake up. So that's one view of the universe. or of existence, right? He had mentioned earlier. So at first, it's locked in this rigid pose of stone, of just materiality. But now it begins to change, and it's going to broaden out into life, to move a bit. So it changes its pose. All of a sudden, this material existence quickens, becomes alive.
If I may say, the dreamer can also be termed as the desirer, I would say, because often men find that when they follow their dreams, they're in actuality following their desires. And we come upon this life to live out our desires, which eventuate to either consciously or unconsciously evolving the world to its divine kingdom. And so a dreamer can be a desirer, and a dreamer can be the one living out their dreams in actuality of life here on earth, rather than the dream in the dream world. The dream world can be a symbolism of that here.
But there's also the illusion of Vishnu who dreams the world.
Yeah, that's one of the Hindu myths of Vishnu lying, and his dreams become the universe. Or the universe is his dream.
In Bhavan is a wonderful dreaming Vishnu. It's one of the temples.
It's interesting. It says, when the inconscient, scrupulous work was done, and chance coerced by fixed, immutable laws, a scene was set for nature's conscious play.
The contradiction is very powerful.
But that's, I think in a way, isn't that the contradiction in science, or that scientific view? No? It's supposedly all is starting from chance, but then it turns into these fixed laws.
But the better image, this cosmic dance image is very good, because the cosmic dance has the still point in it. So there's the still point, but the cosmic dance is going on all at the same time. The dancer is the dance. So that's another theme that is, I think, very significant to help us understand, what's happening to us now.
Tom? I don't have the number.
Say again?
192.
Then stirred the spirit's mute, immobile sleep. The force concealed broke dumbly, slowly out. The dream of living woke in matter's heart. A will to live moved the unconscious dust. A free freak of living startled vacant time, ephemeral in a blank eternity, infinitesimal in a dead infinite. A subtler breath quickened dead matter's forms. The world's set rhythm changed to a conscious cry, a serpent power twinned the insensible force. Islands of living dotted lifeless space, and germs of living formed in formless air.
Thank you. Let's pause. He goes back to the image of the dreamer and says, a dream of living woke in matter's heart. So the first beginnings of life arise out of inconscient matter. A freak of living, startled, vacant time. A freak is something abnormal or a sudden turn of events. Ephemeral in a blank eternity. Life is very fleeting, especially these very simple life organisms. All of a sudden, they're arising in this eternity of matter spread out across the universe, lasting for a few seconds and then dying. Infinitesimal in a dead infinite. He's showing this contrast between the life and the physical.
You feel a strong echo to the very beginning of Savitri. It lives from God's over.
First page. Then something in the inscrutable darkness heard. Nameless movement and unsought idea.
So maybe this is also touching in the way how I'm wondering when you have like an operation or things, or you have hurt your, it's cutting and bleeding, and how the body itself is healing it and bringing it together again. Yeah? I mean, there is still this force working in everyday for things.
Yeah, that same subtle wizard that was in matter is also in life.
In the body especially. How it knows what to do. But it does it. But one line, la rime is very important. The word self-given change to a conscious cry. Who it cried? The cells cried. The body cried.
It's poetry.
It's poetry. Please. Don't kill the poetry. You don't know? Don't kill the poetry. Mother said,
But something is.
Mother, who it cried? Alors, maybe you know agenda of the mother or not, but mother tell is the cells for changing. It was not this line for just coming in my mind now. Cells. For that effect. That's all. You know cells or you don't know, but divine play always. When you are conscious or not conscious, depends your level of consciousness. That's all.
No, I think when he says cry, it means it's just an intensification of energy. Not that somebody really cries. It becomes more intense.
The word.
I'm wondering, the serpent power, I'm wondering if that's something to do with Kundalini?
Well, I don't know if it's to. I mean, it's a twinning of life and matter. Whether that is part of the Kundalini tradition, I don't know. But it's two snakes coming together. So here, life is twinning with matter.
It's a symbolism of evolution.
Huh?
The snake, the serpent.
Yeah.
It's a symbolism of evolution. Yeah. Conscience power. So evolution, the power of evolution from below. That's what Mother Ensure means in the necklace. And that's why Kundalini is also described as a.
Yeah, it's described as a serpent, I know. It's this power, normally, we look at it as this power arising up from the lower chakra upwards. There it's a power. Here he's speaking of life and matter. Life is though a power also.
The next line, what is there? There's islands of living, dotted life this way. So they're in patches they're started, yeah? Or what?
Yeah, that's how life, it arises just in little points in different places. It's not everywhere all at once. There are these separate individuals. I think we have to stop there for today. Come to the end of our time. So Hini was waiting to read.
Astonished by the unaccustomed glow, as if immanent in the shadows, started up imps with wry limbs and carved beast visages, sprite, prompters, goblin, wizard, all fairy small, and genie fairer, but unsouled, and poor, and fallen beings, their heavenly portion lost, and errant divinities trapped in time's dust.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.